The cafeteria at Maplewood Middle School wasn't loud with yelling or food fights, but it was still a battlefield. It was the kind of place where one glance could decide everything. Who mattered? Who didn't? Who fit in? Who was invisible? At the far end of the lunchroom, Maya Carter sat alone, slowly peeling the edges of her peanut butter sandwich, pretending not to hear the whispers coming from a few tables away. "Why does she always sit by herself?" a voice muttered. "Maybe she doesn't have any friends." Another giggled. Maya had heard it all before. She was used to feeling like an outsider. Being one of the only black students at Maplewood meant she never really blended in. So she learned to stay quiet, stay invisible, stay out of trouble. It was easier that way, but not for Jason Miller. Jason made sure Maya knew exactly where she stood. He wasn't just any kid. He was the one everyone wanted to be friends with. His dad owned half the businesses in town. His mom was on the school board. Teachers never gave him detention. He was the kid everyone smiled at, the one who got away with everything. And for the past month, he had chosen Maya as his favorite target. At first, it was just small things, bumping into her in the hallway, whispering her name just loud enough to hear, knocking her books off her desk. Nothing people would call bullying, just kids being kids. But it never stopped there. Today, it was her lunch. Maya had barely taken a bite when a hand snatched her paper bag off the table. She looked up. Jason stood there, grinning, like it was all just a joke. "What's for lunch, Carter?" he smirked, shaking the bag. He tore it open, pulled out her sandwich, and frowned dramatically. "Peanut butter? Really?" He glanced back at his friends. "Guess your dad's new job isn't paying much." Laughter erupted from the table behind him. Maya's fingers curled under the table. Her jaw tightened, but she stayed silent. She always did. Jason leaned in closer. "You should say thank you, you know. I'm helping you with your diet." Then he tossed the sandwich over his shoulder. It landed on the floor with a soft splat. Maya's stomach twisted. She wasn't going to cry. Not here. Not in front of them. She bent down to pick it up, but before she could, a foot came down hard, smashing it into the floor. Jason smirked. "Oops." For a moment, everything faded. The cafeteria, the voices, the noise. All she could hear was the sound of their laughter. She felt their eyes on her, waiting to see if she'd cry, if she'd fight back, if she'd break. But she already knew what she would do. She grabbed her backpack, stood up, and walked away. She ignored the whispers, the snickers, the stares burning into her back. She walked past the lunchroom, past the lockers, all the way to the girls' bathroom. She locked the stall, sat on the closed toilet lid, and took a slow, shaky breath. This wasn't new. She'd sit here until the lunch bell rang, then pretend like nothing happened. Because telling someone never worked. The teachers would say, "Just ignore him." The principal would call it a misunderstanding. And tomorrow, it would happen all over again. But what Maya didn't know was that tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow, she wouldn't just walk away. Tomorrow, Jason would push her too far. Tomorrow, everything would change. But right now, all she could do was wait. Across the room, Jason sat at his usual table, grinning, scrolling through his phone, like none of it mattered. Maya's fingers curled into the fabric of her sweater. This was worse than the shoving, worse than the stolen lunch, worse than the trips in the hallway. This wasn't just bullying. This was isolation, making sure no one sat with her, making sure no one talked to her, making sure no one even wanted to be seen with her. And it worked. She sat alone that day, and the next, and the next. By the time the final bell rang, Maya thought, maybe, just maybe, Jason had finally moved on. She was wrong. She was halfway across the parking lot heading home when she heard it. "Hey, Carter." She ignored it, kept walking. "Where you going? Thought we were friends." Her grip on her backpack straps tightened. The pavement suddenly felt too open, too exposed. Then a hand grabbed her wrist. She jerked away, spinning around. "Don't touch me." Jason grinned, like this was all a game. "Relax, I just wanted to say hi." The boys behind him laughed. They always did. Maya's heart pounded in her ears. "Leave me alone." Jason leaned in, his voice low. "Or what? You gonna tell on me?" Maya swallowed hard. "Thought so." He flicked her backpack strap. "You're just mad 'cause nobody cares." Something snapped. Before she even knew what she was doing, Maya shoved him hard. Jason stumbled back. For the first time, he didn't look amused. That should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. Because Jason Miller wasn't used to being embarrassed. And in that moment, he decided to make sure she never forgot it. Maya barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Jason's face, the way his friends had gone quiet for just a second, before laughing again. She had never fought back before. Now, she had no idea what was coming next. Saturday passed. Nothing happened. Sunday, nothing. By Monday morning, Maya told herself, maybe, just maybe, Jason had moved on. She should have known better. It started with the stares. Then, the whispers. By third period, the snickers had turned into something else. As she walked down the hallway, students turned their phones toward her, pretending to be looking at something funny. Some pointed. Some laughed under their breath. Others just shook their heads, like they knew something she didn't. Maya's stomach twisted. She hurried to her desk in English class, eyes locked on the scratched-up surface, trying to block out the murmurs. Then, a voice from behind her. "Nice photos, Carter." Maya's head snapped up. Lily Harper, one of Jason's friends, sat behind her, smirking, tapping on her phone. Maya's chest tightened. Her hands shook as she grabbed her phone from her backpack. She unlocked it. Her notifications were flooded. Her breath caught in her throat. It was a picture of her, taken in the school parking lot, when she had shoved Jason, but someone had edited it. Her face was twisted, exaggerated into an angry snarl. Bold red letters slapped across the top. "Psycho Carter can't control herself." Her fingers trembled as she scrolled. The comments poured in. "Wow, she looks unhinged. No wonder she has no friends. Jason should have hit her back. I heard she tried to scratch his face." Maya's throat closed. She forced herself to swallow. She wouldn't cry. Not here. Not in front of them. Lily leaned forward, her voice syrupy sweet. "Jason says you have a temper problem. Maybe you should get some help." Maya's pulse hammered. She stared straight ahead, her nails digging into her palms. She had never felt so humiliated in her life. By lunchtime, everyone had seen the picture. By the time school let out, it was all anyone talked about. By the time Maya made it home, she was ready to disappear. She pushed open the front door. Her father was waiting, and he was holding his phone. "Maya." His voice was too calm, too steady. "Sit down." Her stomach twisted. She sank onto the couch, her backpack still on her shoulders. Her father turned his phone toward her. It was the same photo, the same words. His face was unreadable. "You want to explain this to me?" Maya's heart pounded. I didn't do anything." Her father's jaw tightened. I know. His eyes darkened. And I know exactly who did. A lump formed in her throat. Dad, please. But he wasn't listening anymore. He was already dialing a number. And in that moment, Maya knew. Jason Miller had finally messed with the wrong person. Maya's father wasn't the kind of man who yelled. He didn't slam doors. He didn't make threats. When he was angry, he got quiet. And right now, the silence in the living room was suffocating. He held the phone to his ear. His face was unreadable. Maya sat frozen, watching him as he spoke. His voice calm, firm. Principal Harris, we need to talk, now. Maya's stomach twisted. Her father, the man who had spent years dealing with gang disputes, crime investigation, corruption cases, was now handling her school problem. And he wasn't treating it like some silly middle school drama. She could hear Principal Harris's voice on the other end, muffled, nervous. Something about looking into it. Something about kids being kids. Her father's jaw tightened. We're not looking into it. We're fixing it. Today. Within an hour, they were in his car, driving to Maplewood Middle School. The building looked different in the evening light. Emptier. Quieter. As they stepped inside, Principal Harris was already waiting, arms crossed. A forced smile. Officer Carter, he greeted. I understand you have some concerns. Maya's father didn't bother with small talk. Jason Miller has been harassing my daughter for over a month. And now, he's spreading false accusations about her online. He pulled out his phone, held it up. This is what I want removed. The principal shifted uncomfortably. Now, Officer Carter, let's not blow this out of proportion. I spoke with Jason's parents, and they assured me. I don't care what his parents assured you. His voice was sharp now. I care about what he did. The principal hesitated. We don't want to punish a student for... Maya's father took a step forward. His voice dropped. Do you know what my job is, Harris? Silence. I enforce the law, and last I checked, cyber harassment and targeted bullying fall under some serious categories. A pause. But you know what's worse? His eyes locked on the principal's. A school that looks the other way. Maya watched as the color drained from the principal's face. I'll talk to the Millers again. Her father didn't move. You'll do more than talk. His voice was calm, deadly calm. You'll make sure that picture's taken down. You'll make sure this doesn't happen again, and you'll hold Jason accountable. Principal Harris swallowed. He looked nervous. That's when the office door swung open. Jason walked in, followed by his parents. His father, David Miller, was a man who commanded attention. Broad shoulders, tailored suit. The kind of man who probably owned a yacht just for the aesthetic. His mother was smaller, standing with a tight-lipped smile that never reached her eyes. But Jason wasn't smirking anymore. Officer Carter, David Miller said smoothly, I don't see why this had to turn into a whole spectacle. Maya's father didn't blink. Your son made it one. Mrs. Miller let out a sharp laugh. Oh, come on. They're just kids. They push each other, roughhouse. This is all so unnecessary. Maya's fists clenched. Unnecessary. Her father took a slow, measured breath before speaking. If my daughter had done to your son what he did to her, would we be standing here? His voice was dangerously even. Or would you already have a lawyer lined up? David Miller's jaw twitched. Now, let's not make this about, it is about something. His voice was steady, unshakable. It's about power. It's about what you let your son get away with. And it ends here. Jason shifted uncomfortably. his eyes darting toward his parents. Maya's father turned to Principal Harris. "What's the school's official response?" The principal hesitated, glanced at the Millers, then cleared his throat. "Jason will be suspended, effective immediately." The room went silent. Mrs. Miller gasped. "Suspended? For what? A stupid joke?" David Miller's face darkened. "You can't do this. Do you know who I am?" Maya's father didn't blink. "Do you know who I am?" The tension in the room thickened. David Miller's lips pressed into a thin line. "This isn't over." Maya's father didn't flinch. "You're right. It's not." Jason swallowed hard. He wasn't grinning anymore. But this time, he was the one who looked afraid. Jason Miller didn't show up to school the next day, or the day after that. By the end of the week, the rumors had started. "I heard his dad tried to fight the school board over his suspension." "Nah, I heard his mom called the district, demanding they erase it from his record. His family's thinking about sending him to private school." Maya listened, but she never said a word. She just walked to class, kept her head down, and ignored the glances. Except this time, they weren't filled with pity or laughter. They were filled with something else. Respect. By Monday, the photo of her was gone. Principal Harris made an announcement about online harassment, how the school had a zero-tolerance policy for bullying. It was the kind of speech that would have meant nothing before. But now, people were listening. By Wednesday, Maya could walk down the hallway without feeling the weight of whispers behind her back. The snickers had faded, the stares had softened. A few students even nodded at her in passing. Silent acknowledgments that they had seen what happened. At lunch, Maya sat alone. She was used to it. But today, as she picked at her tray, someone slid into the seat across from her. She looked up. Lily Harper. Maya's stomach tensed. She expected another fake sweet insult, another passive-aggressive remark, but Lily just poked at her food with her fork. "So," she muttered, not quite meeting Maya's eyes, "guess you got the last laugh, huh?" Maya didn't answer. Lily cleared her throat. "Look, I wasn't really trying to be part of all that. Maya set her fork down. "You just laughed." Lily winced. Maya didn't have the energy for this. She picked up her tray and stood. Lily shifted uncomfortably. He had it coming, you know. Maya stopped. Lily finally looked at her. No smirk, no arrogance, just something else. Guilt. Maya said nothing. She just walked away, because today, for the first time in a long time, Maya had a choice. She wasn't the one hiding anymore. Jason was. And maybe, just maybe, that meant something had finally changed. But Maya wasn't done yet. The next evening, she sat at the kitchen table. Her father poured himself a cup of coffee. "How's school?" he asked, like it was any normal day. Maya shrugged. "Better." He raised an eyebrow. "Just better?" She smirked. "Well, better than last week." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "That's good." He took a slow sip of his coffee. "You know, I'm proud of you." Maya blinked. "For what?" "I didn't do anything." Her father set his mug down. "You stood up for yourself." Maya hesitated. "I shouldn't have had to." Her father's expression softened. "You shouldn't have." Maya exhaled, her fingers tracing the grain of the wooden table beneath her hands. "What happens to Jason?" Her father leaned back in his chair. "That's up to him." She frowned. "What do you mean?" He studied her carefully. "Actions have consequences. He's learning that now. Whether he changes or not, that's on him." She thought about that. For so long, Jason had seemed untouchable. He had the right friends, the right family, the right last name. He walked through the world like nothing could ever touch him. But he had been wrong. Maya wasn't afraid of him anymore. And maybe, just maybe, that was the real victory, because this time, when she walked into school, she wasn't the one looking over her shoulder. Maya never saw Jason Miller again. By the end of the week, his family had pulled him out of school. Some said he was transferring to a private academy in another district. Others whispered that his father had pulled some strings to get him into a boarding school out of state. Either way, he was gone. And for the first time in a long time, Maya could breathe. But just because Jason was gone didn't mean things were suddenly perfect. The damage had already been done. The weight of his cruelty, the months of humiliation, it didn't just vanish overnight. There were still the stares, the hushed conversations, the students who didn't know whether to pretend nothing had happened, or finally acknowledge that everything had. But Maya wasn't waiting for their approval anymore. Instead, she did something she never would have dared before. She raised her hand in class. She spoke up when she had something to say. She looked people in the eye when she passed them in the hall. And slowly, very slowly, the isolation began to crack. On Friday, a girl from her math class slid into the seat next to her at lunch. She didn't say much, just a casual, "Hey." A day later, someone asked her if she wanted to be in their group project instead of waiting for the teacher to assign her. By Monday, a boy from her English class, a quiet kid who never got involved in anything, muttered under his breath as he walked past her locker, "What he did was messed up." Maya turned. "What?" The boy adjusted his backpack strap, barely looking at her. Just saying, "If I had known it was that bad, He cut himself off, shaking his head. "Doesn't matter." But it did. It mattered because people were finally seeing, not just Maya, but what had happened, what they had let happen, because silence is its own kind of crime. Maya didn't say anything back. She just gave him a small nod. It was enough, that night. Maya sat in the living room, flipping through a book, while her father read the newspaper. The TV hummed in the background, some random crime show playing, but neither of them were really watching. After a moment, her father folded the newspaper, set it on the table. "You know," his voice was calm, "I had my own Jason Miller when I was your age." Maya glanced up. "Yeah?" He nodded, leaning back, his eyes distant, like he was remembering something from a long time ago. Didn't have social media back then, but the game was the same. Maya hesitated. "Did you do anything about it?" Her father exhaled slowly. "I didn't have a choice." She frowned. "What do you mean?" He turned to her, his expression steady. "I had to decide, let him define me, or define myself." Maya swallowed. Then, to her surprise, a small smile played on his lips. "I'm sitting here, aren't I?" A quiet laugh escaped her. "Yeah, guess you are." He patted her shoulder. "And you are too." Maya sat with that for a while. For the longest time, it had felt like Jason had all the power, like he decided how things went, like she had no control. But that wasn't true. She had made a choice too, to speak, to fight, to push back, and that had made all the difference. On Monday morning, she walked into school. The halls felt different, or maybe she was different. Lily Harper caught her eye from across the hallway. She gave a small nod. Not an apology, not an excuse, but something close enough. The boy from English class held the door open for her, without saying anything, and when she sat down in the cafeteria, A girl from her history class slid into the seat across from her. "You mind if I sit here?" Maya looked at her for a moment, then shrugged. "Go for it." She wasn't looking for an apology. Not from the whole school. She didn't need one, because she had already won. Not by getting rid of Jason Miller, but by making sure that next time, someone like him wouldn't win so easily. Because next time, people wouldn't just look away. No one should have to fight to be treated with basic respect. No one should have to prove they deserve to exist without being harassed. But the truth is, standing up for yourself isn't always easy. Sometimes people look away. Sometimes they pretend it's not happening. But silence helps bullies win. And the moment you stop being silent, the moment you refuse to let them define you, that's when they lose their power. If this story meant something to you, consider sharing it. Because these conversations matter, and the more we talk about them, the harder it is for anyone to pretend they don't.